The world's greatest and most humble genius made their debut in One Piece chapter 485, referenced by Kuma as the greatest scientist and being 500 years ahead of mankind. This week's chapter displayed the true personality of Stella and demonstrated his conviction to the betterment of mankind. I thought this was a great way to close the loop on Stella's personality traits. I particularly enjoyed the interactions between Shaka, Stella, and Pythagoras. I think out of all the Vegapunks, their interactions seem more tolerable and less enthusiastic or kind of out the box. In the memory recap, I think there were some really interesting insights and scientific nuggets that on the first read I didn't necessarily catch, but when I went back and reread it again, it really demonstrates Vegapunk's conviction, as I mentioned, to humankind. And when I say that, when you think about some of the key inventions that he truly takes pride in, they are based on providing the necessities for life. And what I mean by that is, if you think about the main necessities for life, what are they? It's food, shelter, clothing, and energy. And so when we think about some of those inventions that we came across on Egghead, we know about the machine that is able to create almost any meal. We have the clothing machine that's able to kind of fit clothing to anybody. And then the two more important ones are the infinite energy source, the Mother Flame, which is yet to be perfected. And then in this one, we learn about the Cloud Loft technology being used potentially to save humankind. Of course, you know that the Cloud Loft technology is going to be used to help mitigate the effects of the biblical event that will eventually happen when Uranus is used in the future to erase Island. Continuing on the topic of Vegapunk's incredible scientific research, we have to touch on the Seraphim, and I thought Shaka had some interesting lines here where he talks about, he identifies a connection between the Seraphim and the power station, which is run by the Mother Flame. Essentially, the Seraphim require energy, right? And what I thought was interesting about this is, yeah, they're clones and they're growing, but we've never really thought about them requiring energy as explicitly as it is denoted in this chapter. And my mind immediately goes to alchemy. So in my last chapter review, I referenced how I thought Emeth was a potential form of alchemy because the science behind it makes sense, but the sentience that Emeth displayed as a robot just seemed way too abnormal to be just pure science. And we're already kind of getting introduction into magic as it relates to the Grosei and how they're able to kind of teleport using those seals and the potential for them to be demons. So I think Oda is kind of laying the breadcrumbs for the introduction to alchemy. And how I think alchemy is potentially being used is as a form of human experimentation. And this is something that's not new to One Piece, right? So we've gotten human experimentation, with the clone development from the Germa, the cyborgs, and of course Caesar's experiments on gigantification. But what if that human experiment was used to create energy? So when we take the concept of life, right? Let's think about the Opi Opi no Mi. We know that the Opi Opi no Mi requires a life to give a life, eternal life, right? That's the ultimate surgery that the Opi Opi no Mi can use. Hypothetically, what if that concept applied to the Mother Flame, right? In order to create an eternal living flame, you needed to sacrifice life. And what better life to sacrifice than the life of a combustible human. This is just kind of my headcanon, but I started to think more and more about that. Every time I read a reference to the Mother Flame, I think more on how Nika is the progenitor to the Lunarian race. We can essentially hypothesize that the Mother Flame is silver, as I mentioned, based off of its resemblance to Luffy's hair. And then when you just think about Luffy's similarities to the Lunarians, it's way too strong to just be coincidence, right? So a rubbery body, aspects demonstrated by King as he's able to stretch his face. Silver hair, right? Luffy's hair turns white. It's essentially the same as King. The ability to ignite their body into flames. We've seen Luffy demonstrate this with his Gomu Gomu no Mi techniques. And so I'm starting to think that the ancient kingdom was able to have an intersection between science and life, similar to how cyborgs are used. And I think evidence of that is in other ways where science and life forms, life energy intersect, right? So in the last chapter, we understand that haki can be sealed, and the definition of haki, or translation of haki, is spirit and willpower. So if you can combine willpower and science as a storage of energy, I don't see why combustible life couldn't be transformed into energy. And it would just make perfect sense, right? That in order to potentially perfect the Mother Flame, the world government may need to sacrifice Lunarians, and what more of an opportunity to do so now that they have the Seraphim under control. Yeah, that's just kind of my headcanon. That's what I got for this chapter, and until next time, Taicho out.